I'm Dame Stephanie. Therapy is mediated by parents, so it's appropriate for me, an IT entrepreneur who had a profoundly autistic child, to contribute to this PACT symposium. My invitation to speak about my years in autism came in recognition of my initial grants to fund PACT research. That was 8 years ago, an age in autism research terms. And it is encouraging to now see PACT getting embedded into practice. I welcome the commissioners, health and education service leads and managers, academics and professionals all here today. And the parents, experts in their own children. I hope you all, especially the guests, are finding this an interesting day. And I should like to thank everyone who's made it possible. And together we celebrate the progress with PACT and other evidence-based autism intervention into service delivery. Research is slow. Research is expensive. There's no guarantee that we'll produce anything at all. And it's never complete. It opens the way for something still better and so leads to its own eclipse. And today's common facts are the product of yesterday's research. There'll come a time when people will be amazed that we did not know the things that are so plain to them. My Shirley Foundation operated in venture philanthropy and planned projects to be sustainable. So we set up 4 of the major ones for long-term support, for education, strategy and campaigning and research as separate charities. My late son was the first resident in the first home of that first charity, Autism at Kingwood. It took over £3 million and 17 years to become financially independent of me. And today it employs over 300 staff, supports 150 adults with severe autism, just like my Drowsy, and is contracted to keep a weekly overview of a further 100 adults with autism who are able to live independently. The Priors Court School project was started on the eve of 1998 and turned into the Foundation's largest consumer of both time, 5 years, and money, 30 million, including startup losses. My available funds having increased dramatically by then, the whole project was carried out very professionally. A residential school for pupils aged 5 to 25 years with autism and moderate to severe, many people would say profound, learning difficulties. Apart from recollections of our own school days, none of the steering group I set up had any educational experience. The original aim was to operate under license from the Higashi School in Boston in the United States, which had inspired me. We contracted with an educational consultant to carry out a feasibility study, a discipline that suits my business culture and one that saved us from more than one mistake. Then contracted with various consultants to find and help us acquire a property, and then a host of contractors with people to manage the contractors to make the building suitable for purpose, knocking down and replacing one of the buildings and modernizing the others. And in addition, we had to recruit the initial staff. After hectic 22 months, we opened in September 1999 with 28 staff and 2 small pupils. Break-even was at 55 pupils. And we did achieve the business plan and to break even in 5 years. And 20 years later, the turnover is over 20 million, and there are nearly 600 staff and 2 teaching robots for a roll of over 90 pupils, including 20 students in a young adult centre. Priors Court is the state-of-the-art quality school to which I would have been happy to entrust my son's physical, intellectual, and spiritual development. It's currently in the early stages of planning a second school. We also took the initiative to head up a new organisation to develop policies, strategies, and bilingual services for autism in Wales. And Autism Cymru led Wales to the first ever national strategy for autism, to the Celtic Nations Autism Partnership, and inspired some 16 million of ring-fenced public funding to support the Wales Autism Strategic Action Plan. And its trustees took a very brave step in closing the charity down after 13 years, once its mission was achieved. The fourth and last charity, no, not last, latest, was the culmination of a series of medical research projects starting in the year 2000 and leading in 2004 to Autistica, the UK autism research charity. And you will have already heard about this from its chief executive, John Spears. As well as establishing these 4 charities, we also supported existing not-for-profits. We did a number of projects for the Mental Health Foundation for learning disability generally, because at that time it was not possible to separate out the condition of autism. And we also funded the infrastructure costs of the Parents' Autism Campaign for Education. And similarly, a national advice and expert witness service for the charity Resources for Autism. The aim was that that should become freestanding, but it had to close down, and we learned the important lesson that it's never enough to do good. It has to be sustainable. The Shirley Foundation had its mission focused on projects that were pioneering, never more of the same, no matter how worthy, and strategic. What do I mean by that? Projects that, if successful, make a significant difference in the sea of autism need. Over the years, we funded, directly or indirectly, projects at 12 universities, relying on them for due diligence. At Cambridge, for example, our sponsorship included the epidemiological study of school children, which first determined the high prevalence of autism. And also a commercial venture, teaching autistic children to recognize facial expression. And that was acted out by Daniel Radcliffe, then unknown prior to Harry Potter. We supported the Patrick Wild Centre at the University of Edinburgh, starting with a mock scanner in 2007, later complemented by work on functioning imaging biomarkers, and followed by a £1 million grant in 2011 for an imaging suite of microscopy equipment. The university leveraged additional and significant support from the university and others, including Autistica. In 1997, we started what became a series of studies by the London School of Economics on the economics of autism. That was our focus. The initial study was updated 10 years later, then again in 2014, and was the major contributor to the Foundation's National Autism Project, which ran from 2014 to 2018. Some projects linked both my interests, information technology, my professional discipline, and autism. I was a researcher, I've managed research, I've directed research at a government level, and now fund research, trying always to think creatively and to set a culture of scientific inquiry for others. One project in 1996 was a web conference on autism, attended by over 65,000 people from around the world. And this was a first in the disability field. I thought it was a first completely, but it turned out to be a third. And it certainly linked with the Global Health Network for Autism, which we funded at Oxford some 15 years later. Another success was the funding given to the University of Birmingham to develop and create an online web-based level 1 course for professionals, parents, and autistic individuals to gain an accredited qualification in autism. And that course is now in its 18th year, and many students have developed their careers in autism as a result and continued their studies to gain higher qualifications. I'm very proud of that. My visit to what is now Autism Together in the Wirral to consider a modest request for computer equipment led to our funding to the 800,000 conversion of a derelict building into a care home for 12 young autistic people and a community facility for the area. And that seemed in tune with Port Sunlight's history of prosperity sharing. A significant project for the University of Nottingham in 1999 was early in using virtual reality to develop independent skills for adults with autism. Things such as finding their way around the city and how to take a seat in a bus, because clearly if you take the first available seat, it might cause a lot of problems. And that pioneering work was developed by others and remains current today, 20 years on. Many of our projects aim to bring the fragmented sector together, and that philosophy has been continued by Autistica. Whenever we found a gap in services, we tried to help, and we're responsible for the setting up of a number of autism projects. 1999 was particularly significant because once I'd recovered from my son's death, I initiated some 30 autism projects that year, including the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Autism at Westminster, now the second largest such group, which is the largest. The largest is actually BEAR, All-Party Parliamentary Group on BEAR, very popular. But the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Autism led to a similar work in Scotland, which failed. Looking back, I can perceive strings of related projects on economics, taking a good idea out to the developed nations, topping up major projects, and of course, medical research. And we also sponsored 3 books on autism. are big six-figure autism gifts. They're not really gifts, they're social investments. But they went to, the big ones went to the 4 charities that I've mentioned, and the universities of Oxford, Cambridge, and Edinburgh. A handful were almost up to the $1 million mark, 2 at well over $500,000, dozens valued between 100,000 and $250,000, with a sprinkling of minor benefactions. To mark the 10th anniversary of the Shirley Foundation, we did an evaluation study to try and score projects. And the process, although it was, looking back, somewhat amateur, clearly showed that the larger projects were better. After 20 years, we commissioned a third-party impact survey which reviewed 30 of the 70 grants recipients. And those responses covered 85% of the 50 million given to autism, and clearly indicated that the funding achieved its intended purposes and would have been, I quote, hard pressed to achieve more. And that was a lovely anonymous quote. Let me backtrack to concentrate on my research progress. It's a journey, really. Nobel laureate Richard Feynman wrote, "A problem is grand in science if it lies before us unresolved and we can see some way to make a little headway into it." Now, I'm restricted to, in practice, to funding projects which a lay person can understand. However, the digital world will enable research that was previously done over a lifetime of a group to be done in just a few years by a single person. And I am knowledgeable about that. So I follow the scientific method. Try things out, see if they work, change if they don't. I started to arm myself through research, and I don't mean Google, round about the millennium. What was needed to understand autism and thereafter its causes, and then to cost the task. My model was Kennedy's "What do we have to do to get man onto the moon?" I believe in partnerships, alliances, associations, affiliates, consortia, networks, the laboratories of this century. And by 2002, I pulled together a team including Washington University, the Mind Institute, itself a collaborative research center in California, and Cambridge. The cost came out at 0.4 of a billion, and that was well beyond my financial capacity. I obviously had to do something different. I looked for partners. There were 2 outstanding contenders, both parent-led. When you think about it, a lot of the pioneering work has been parent-led, and both in the States, with one having a scientific bent, which was much in my style. So I joined its trustee board and to learn how they did things. My years on this established American autism research charity triggered my interest in baby sibling studies. And in 2006, Autistica funded a brainstorming workshop for some 30 professionals, including Jonathan and Catherine, at which it was decided to set up a UK baby sibling group on the lines of the American network. Perhaps because I had a traumatic childhood, and experienced at first hand the vulnerability of the child, I feel strongly about children during research. Their inability to make autonomous decisions, and the absolute right of affected families to confidentiality during the research process. And pediatric ethics depends on genuine respect for children and distinguishing between parental permission, child assent, legal authorization, and moral responsibility. Today sees the launch of Impact, so I'm especially proud of our 2012 support of PACT, Preschool Autism Communication Therapy, which was largely funded by the MRC. And this proved to be a catalyst and led 4 years later to some positive conclusions on the long-term value of early intervention. Most of our projects show public benefit over a period of years, not months. And PACT was realised as a collaborative effort between 5 academic bodies, including Manchester, plus 4 primary care trusts, as one of the largest international autism intervention studies, and it was a major scientific success. I'd been impressed by Professor Jonathan Green when working on an earlier Birkbeck project. And our funding of PACT proved to be a star of the formal impact assessment we did, and indeed a landmark moment for autism research, the first high-quality clinical trial to find evidence of effectiveness for a treatment or intervention. The first. We also supported Dr. Aldridge's Roundway Centre in 2012, and the 2016 Lancet follow-up paper, of which she was a co-author, showed it to be one of the very few clinically effective interventions. Autistica took my efforts forward. Jonathan leads the PACT implementation and is an Autistica trustee. You've heard from its chief executive, John Spears, how Autistica set up BASIS, responsible for developing the earliest signs of autism at a cost, BASIS, 1.5 million. And since then, it's gone on to attract over £15 million of funding and led to a European-wide infant sibling network. Together with other funders, Autistica set up iBasis, based on PACT and one of the earliest intervention trials, and recruited infants likely to have autism aged 9 to 14 months. And that's showing promising signs of effectiveness. Let me come to my conclusion. My Shirley Foundation never had dynastic aims, and in 2016 decided to close itself down with a target date at the end of 2018. And Autistica received the Foundation's residual gift and has been working to support the implementation of PACT by engaging with the Department of Health and Social Care, with NHS England and commissioners. And now we have the Impact Social Enterprise. Let me express everyone's good wishes. We do wish it all success. Oh, how I wish I were starting again and could work alongside you all. Thank you very much.